Alright, so hello everyone and welcome to another episode of CoT Lorecast, which I believe is actually correctly episode 8 this time. Like last time I said it was 8, it's actually 7. So totally this one's actually 8, I mean it, for realsies. I'm here with Bromms, Alucardalina again,
Hello.
and we are going to be talking about the Norn today. The oversized, larger-than-life, heavily Viking-inspired race that most of you will know from Guild Wars 1, and all of you will know from Guild Wars 2. But first, how are you two doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, likewise. I'm well.
You guys enjoying the new content in the game?
Yeah. I'm waiting for Lorner's Fast to open up again.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play all that much of it, unfortunately. But it seems fun so far.
Yeah, it's a lot of farming, but well, that's not supposed to be, but that's what it turns out to be.
Yeah.
So, alright, so let's talk origin of the Norn. I have a couple of things of the origin, not the stuff that necessarily ties directly into history, but let's go with what I have here. So, like I said, it's obviously heavily influenced from Norse and Viking culture and mythology. A lot of the Norn names, a lot of them actually, are characters from Norse mythology, or heavily inspired by names, or slightly altered versions of the names, to the point where, if you try to pick a Norse god or something like that as a name, you're never going to find it. Also, you're going to see a lot of Sigurd's son, Sigurd's Dotir characters running around, and that's because Sigurd was one of the very prevalent Viking heroes of the day, Norse heroes, so that's why a lot of people pick that, meaning that their character is theoretically the son or daughter of Sigurd. So it's a little in-game tidbit for you guys. But let's see. Oh, and there were Norn in Norse mythology, which is actually a thing. And they are basically, if you guys are familiar with Greek mythology and the fates of Greek mythology, the Norn are basically the same equivalent of the fates, but in Norse mythology. So, a little bit of, I don't really see how that ties too much to the Norn that we know in Guild Wars 2, but the name is the same, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Alright, so why don't I do our typical, we'll talk about, actually I was going to talk about the Movement of the World article, but that kind of gives us, you know what, I'll just do it anyway, because it seems customary at this point. So,
Do it.
Decimus the Historian on the Norn. Many expected the initial Char expansion through Northern Tyria to become a tide of blood that would crash upon the Shiver Peaks, drowning Char and Norn alike. The reality proved different. When the Char reached the foothills, the Norn drove them back with a single crushing blow, completely decimating every warband set against them. Although it is certain that the Char could have destroyed the Norn resistance if they had but turned their entire army, or even one full legion, to the cause, warbands and smaller raiding parties could not overcome the individual strength of the Norn. These initial skirmishes taught both sides to respect the strength of the other. From this accord of mutual respect and strength arose a strange pseudo-alliance that has yet to be broken. For nearly 200 years, the eastern border of the Shiver Peaks has been stable. The Char allowed passage through Gunner's Hold and the lower canyons where the Norn had spread. In fact, during the Searing, the Norn allowed the Char armies passage through the northern pass from Ascalon into Krita, setting the stage for the Char invasion of the central human lands. Although this was not a sign of any alliance, it set the stage for the two races to live within a watchful peace. No peace accord was ever signed. A treaty would have been meaningless to the individualistic Norn, and no Char would even spit on such a paper. However, the two races allowed one another passage and trade while keeping their borders secure. Occasionally a warband, or a Norn hunter, might cross the line into the other's land only to be cut down without prejudice, but these skirmishes do not disrupt the accord reached by mutual consent between these nations. Over the past 100 years, more and more Norn have been seen in Krita and the lands beyond. An elder dragon of ice and snow rose in the farthest northern peaks, driving even the most stalwart hunters south into dwarven lands. There they found abandoned dwarven forts and a new challenge in the form of the dredge, the old nemesis of the dwarves, now almost recognizable from their primitive, frightened creatures of the past. The dredge, reveling in their newfound freedom after the dwarves fell to the destroyers, seized that opportunity to become a real threat in the Shiver Peaks, while the Norn revel in the hunt of new enemies. The Norn and dredge fight over control of these lands in a continual war that rages along the highest mountains. The Norn have also kept ties with their human friends, although these ties are not as close as they once were, for the Norn often felt betrayed by their unpredictable human allies. In recent years, that sense of betrayal has deepened as the Norn do not trust the Crichton Queen. The Queen is seen by members of this independent race as being too dependent on her advisors, too unwilling to act on her own as a hero must. Although relations have grown colder, the Norn hold out hope that the Crichton Queen will prove herself by dominating her race, or that someone else will rise from among the humans to show them what it means to be strong. Again, remember that these articles were written well in the just at the beginning of Guild Wars 2's announcement, so some of those things may have changed, which the Norn and the Dredge, I don't really get the feeling that there's a lot of animosity there. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, there's a couple events, I think, in Snowden Drifts where the Dredge are kind of taking over, but it's... Yeah, I never really got the impression that they were a huge threat to the Norn. It's mostly other things.
As someone who travels a lot, I can see where the dredge are more of a nuisance to the Norn.
Yeah.
Just because you can look at places that Norn have been, that dredge have kind of moved into.
Yeah, I feel like this article though, and I'm not discounting that at all. I feel that this article makes it seem like the Dredge were going to be like a large piece of who the Norn were, like we were going to have to fight them a lot more. I mean, you do face off against the Dredge in your personal story depending on which path you chose and like which choices you made. But I feel like the Dredge are there, but this article makes them out to seem like a much bigger threat and much bigger part of Norn culture than I feel they actually are.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about the Norn and the human relations, the Norn feel betrayed and they don't trust the Crichton Queen. Do you guys see any real evidence of that?
No.
No.
Yeah, which sounds like a great story, doesn't it? Like that would be an interesting place to start off Guild Wars 2.
I think all the Norn are normally too drunk to care about that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been an interesting thing, is that, you know, we used to have this great relationship with the Norn a la Guild Wars 1, but now, for whatever reason that is undetermined in this article, the Norn feel betrayed, and then maybe we have to work on patching that relationship. There'd be more of that in your personal story rather than patching Destiny's Edge up.
Yeah.
I feel like it's also important to mention these articles now, especially now that we are a full-blown year later in the game, just to see how far we've come from what the initial thoughts were going to be when this article was written in 7 or 5 years ago or so. So it's just an interesting little piece of Guild Wars history. So normally we talk about the history here, so I guess we can kind of roll into Norn history. See if I have anything here. Well, I have lots of stuff on Norn history, actually. But Claire, did you have anything that you wanted to mention Norn history-wise?
You probably have more on Norn history than I do, because they don't have a very clear history as far as Guild Wars 1 goes, and that's kind of my area, you know?
Yeah. So, alright, well, again, if you have played Guild Wars 1, and specifically Eye of the North, you will have been introduced to the Norn there, and I'll kind of save some of that for Claire to talk about. And actually, yeah, she's right. We really don't have a ton of history for the Norn prior to us encountering them in Guild Wars 1. the only thing we do have a little bit of kind of, I guess it's almost like speculation that we get from the Kodan, in that the Norn were originally created as Kodan that came south after there was the great storm that separated the Kodan tribes, and the Norn came south, and eventually they became lesser creatures, giving up the ability to be a bear constantly, for now only the ability to transform into their animal form every so often. And again, we'll talk about this more in the physiology and the behavior of the Norn, but we do see a distinct change in that from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, whereas it was a pretty big piece of who the Norn were in Guild Wars 1, the ability to turn into only a bear, and then it changed to having the ability to change into several animals in Guild Wars 2, but pretty much is never utilized.
There was mention of other spirits in Guild Wars 1, it's just that it wasn't as prevalent.
Yeah, because I mean, we did go through those blessings of the different spirits to get those different skills, the elite skills.
Yeah, I think there was an issue about giving so many elites to each of the spirits.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we only ever saw Norn transform into bear in Guild Wars 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we'll talk more about this, but in Guild Wars 1 they still used weapons as bear form. In Guild Wars 2, they just used their claws and their teeth. So.
Well, in Guild Wars, yeah, I'll let you talk about that later if you need to.
All right. So.
There's also some speculation that the Norn. There's a Jotun storyteller, I think he's in Holbrack, called Thralln the Lost. Mm-hmm. And he says that the stories that were passed down through the Jotun say that the Jotun and the Norn ruled the Shiver Peak Mountains together during what they called the Age of Giants. And that what happened is that both of the races kind of fell from their powerful positions, and it was the spirits of the wild that helped pull the Norn back up to where they are now, while the Jotun didn't have that, so they kind of devolved into their current state. When you actually ask him about it, he says, "The past was a time when the Norn and the Jotun were not like you see us today. Our kingdoms were the most advanced in the entire world. We protected and defended other races." And then when you ask what happened, he says, "You won't understand. We had everything taken from us, and in our confusion at the betrayal, we lost all hope of ever being the great culture that we once were." And then when you ask him about the Norn, he says, "The Norn have come far. Their spirits of the wild returned much of their dignity, heroism, and power to them. They are what I wish the Jotun had become."
That is actually something I never even knew about, and that's extremely interesting. The lore implications of that are immense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I won't spoil too much of it, but you see through the one Ara path where there's the Jotun Ara path. I believe there's a Jotun path, or path.
Yes, there's
1, or is that path? Yeah, or path 2.
I don't know if it's path 1, but it's one of them.
Yeah, and you do see quite a bit of interesting things through the technology that the Jotun once had through their telescope, which is very foreboding for things coming in the future. We kind of talked a little bit about that very briefly in the Elder Dragon episode. But yeah, so we know that they were once this great, they had a lot more magic, the Jotun had more magic, they had this great technology, and I didn't know that about the Norn, though, Norn as well, so that's very interesting. And that they rely on the spirits of the wild to kind of keep them where they are. You just blew my mind right now. I'm done, guys. I can't even.
All right. Well, that was a fun Lorecast.
So I think that's pretty much all we have that we have. I'm going to look through some stuff while I let Claire kind of talk about Guild Wars 1 Norn, and just kind of go over the story we have since we were introduced to them in Guild Wars 1, and I'm just going to see if I can't turn anything up in the meantime. But I'll let her take it away.
Well, we do know that the Norn started out as a nomadic race, and they kind of moved from place to place, and it made them very individualistic. And so they were basically just hunters. And that you can kind of see how they've settled down in Guild Wars 2, but in Guild Wars 1 you find them literally like everywhere on the roads and stuff. And their shelters seem kind of temporary.
Yeah, a lot of makeshift kind of outposts. Like that's where the hunting party stopped at that time.
Right.
Yeah, the major outposts though are mainly for like crafting things, which is very important to settle down to do. So that's why it was kind of central to the northern Shiver Peaks, is because they had those outposts there. And then we get to Jorah, who is the first Norn that we meet. And she comes off as kind of standoffish, and you kind of get this air that the Norn really don't care for humans. But you offer to help her, and she allows you to do that eventually. She's got too much pride. You find out that her brother has been turned into an ice bird, a Svanir. And it seems like he's going in between that state, like a Norn state and an ice bird state, which is the first time we get to see an ice bird. So we go out and help her track down her brother, Svanir, and that leads us to find out that he got too close to Jormag's power, that he was hearing the call from a lake. And Jorah was as well, but she wasn't going to listen to that. She's a bit stronger. But because the Norn ultimately want power and legend, they were really drawn to this. And once Vanir got drawn to that, he let himself get so enveloped in it that he became the ice bird. And Jorah, who got too close, could not change into her bear form, which is a very important thing for them to be able to do. It's kind of looked down upon if you can't, and so she was always kind of made fun of for it. And so this kind of brings about the creation of the Svanir, and we know that they're very important. And when she puts a stop to her brother, this is seen as going against the dragon, and that's why the Svanir do not allow females into their group. There's really not much else other than that.
Yeah, I mean, because you also have to realize too, in Eye of the North, we couldn't really focus too much on one race because the story was split between, 4 races, and you're building reputation with each of them to ultimately then fight the destroyers. So
yeah, which the Norn just kind of tagged along for.
Yeah, only was it 5 of them came at the end?
Something like that. Yeah, they saw it as like a great battle.
Yeah,
They wanted...
that's my quintessential Norn moment, is when Ogden spends the entire game trying to convince the Norn that we need a Norn army to fight the destroyers, and we're at the final battle, and the dwarves are all going through the right of the Great Dwarf, and all the Asura come, and all the Ebon Vanguard and the Char come, and 5 Norn show up. And then he's like, 5? You brought 5? And Jorah's like, I thought 4 would be enough. But, what's his name?
That's why I love the Norn.
And, but so-and-so's daughter wanted to come along, so, yeah, we brought 5. And you know what? They only brought 5, and I think all 5 of them made it out of the battle alive, so...
There you go.
Well, I guess it'd be very difficult to bring more than 5 anyway, because they are nomadic.
Yeah, and we're going underground. Norn are kind of big.
Yeah.
So, and that, I feel like that's kind of almost a tie-in to where we're going to go with the kind of the fit. We'll talk physiology and then quickly kind of, there's not too much there, and we'll kind of roll that into, the appearance and or the behavior rather of the Norn. But I did find a little article in the making of book here, and I just wanted to touch on a little bit of information regarding Guild Wars Utopia because that's here in the making of Guild Wars 2 art book. It says, the Norn, a race originally created for the cancelled Utopia project. The Norn are for those players who want to be classic heroes, clinging to the side of the mountain, using their bare hands to fend off a pack of wild wolves. That's how lore and continuity designer Jeff Grubb sees this race of huge humanoids. The Norn seize life by the horns. They're a happy, life-affirming race that is fiercely independent. They like to party, they enjoy boasting, and they expect acclaim for their actions. So, they venerate their resources, they won't hesitate to kill, they're not tree huggers, but they recognize the spirits of what they kill, much like Native Americans or early Scandinavians have. So, that's a little tidbit from the making of book. But why don't we move on to physiology of the Norn? And most of us kind of have an idea, but Bromms, why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, there's actually not a lot of information as far as some of the detail we've been able to go into with other races, unfortunately. But the Norn are basically the not giants necessarily, but they're the tallest race that we're able to play. Most of them are around 9 feet tall, although with the current way we can make our characters, you can almost make them as short as the tallest humans, or much bigger than that.
Yep.
But in Guild Wars 1, they were all kind of these big, towering kind of beasts of people.
Mm-hmm.
Their proportions are a lot broader, and they're just all around bigger than typical humans. They're a lot more muscled, probably because they fight so much and they travel so often. Their lifespan goes longer than a human's. The longest one recorded, I think, was 120, but most of them don't die of old age.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible they could live longer than that. They typically don't. The biggest thing with them, though, is what we kind of hinted at and talked about earlier was the ability to transform into kind of icons of their spirit animal. It's very similar to like werewolves or were creatures, so they can turn into a bear form where they'll be like half human, half bear, and they'll get things like fur, claws, fangs. Like they'll take on aspects of that animal. That's unfortunately about it. There's really not a lot of information on what they're like as kids, although we can kind of assume and extrapolate that their children are much larger than human children are. But otherwise, it's from what I can find, they're pretty much like humans as far as birth and mating and all that kind of thing is concerned.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're led to believe. We can see a couple of the Norn children kind of doing the snowball fights and stuff.
Right.
They're as tall as my character. My human character.
Yeah. And I don't know why it feels so good to hit them in the face with a snowball, but it really, really does.
One of the other things worth mentioning is that they actually produce a lot of body heat, and this is mentioned a couple of times, which is why they dress so, plantily scad.
Aha.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, you know what? I think that was in Ghosts of Ascalon. I think Franks mentions that.
Yeah, I think sometime it was mentioned in Guild Wars 1, but I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, that they produce a large amount of body heat, because, as you clearly mentioned, the majority of Norn armor is very revealing. It's actually almost quite difficult to find Norn armor that's completely covering, unless you go with kind of some of the new gem store armor and things like that, because those cover everybody everywhere.
I've been having problems finding like less armor in the for my warrior.
Right.
So heavy armor is still like pretty covering.
Go for Norn Tier 2. Is it a female character?
Yeah, I'm doing like I don't remember the top name, but I'm doing tier 3 leggings.
I will, after this, I'll log in the game. I have a Norn Guardian that's got tier 2 top, and I'll show you. It's pretty revealing, but that's besides the point. I do have a couple things I just kind of wanted to tee off. Bromms, you pretty much covered everything that I found. The only thing I did want to mention is that because most of them live in the northern areas, you see a lot of them are very pale, almost white, skin-wise, because they live in such snow-blinded areas in the northern Shiver Peaks. However, like Captain Magnus the Bloody-Handed, for example, who lives primarily in Lion's Arch and sails on the seas, Norn can also have, darker or tan skin depending on where they kind of grew up and were born. Because in Guild Wars 1, obviously, we saw them were all very, very pale skinned, but there are multiple different, skin variations of Norn here 250 years later based on where they're living. And I'll bring it back to kind of to what Claire was saying before and see if she has anything to say, is the transformation in Guild Wars 1 transforming into, as we said, it was only a bear there. The characters would use their weapons still.
In Guild Wars 1, you had your weapons, but your skills that you had while you were transformed were mostly based on instinct.
Okay.
So if you were, I think it was Wolf, you had tracking skills.
Right. Yes. No, I'm sorry. I think I may have misspoken what I was saying. I was referring more to the NPC characters.
Yeah.
Because they look like a bear, but shooting a bow, for instance.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw in there that possibly the skills that they would have had would have probably been about the same as ours, except, they were Norn. So they had a better handle on it all. While we were human with this blessing, we could only do so few.
Yeah, in my mind, I always thought it was just maybe an oversight on the game kind of designer. Because if you think about, like, the monsters just the generic monsters that we would fight in Guild Wars, there were monsters that didn't have, visible weapons. They would just use claws and come up and actually hit you. And I always wondered why they didn't have the NPC Norn do the same when they transformed into a bear, and I always just assumed that it would be because they didn't want to put that much more effort into changing the complete animation when they changed form.
Quite possibly.
But I also like to think that because it's ArenaNet, maybe there's some weird in-lore, in-story reason why in Guild Wars 2 the Norn don't keep their weapons and their armor and everything is kind of assimilated. I mean, their armor was always assimilated into their bear form, but maybe there's a reason why their weapons are in Guild Wars 2. I'd like to think there was a lore reason why there was like a big regime change in the way the Norn operate, but I doubt I could find anything.
What if?
Oh,
How the humans, they only have one specialty now, one class. Whereas we used to have two.
Yep.
What if it's the same thing with them, where they used to have, their thing, but since it's been so long and this has kind of died down a bit, and they're starting to learn less and less as the older Norn kind of die off, and that it's just not being passed down, and it's like kind of becoming watered, and so that they don't have as much strength as they did in Guild Wars 1.
I like it.
I like it too.
I think this needs to get pitched to ArenaNet. You know what? If any of our listeners hear that, or are going to the upcoming this weekend kind of the PAX Prime event where ArenaNet's going to be there answering questions and things like that, first bring up this and say, you know, is there any reason why that changed? Was that just a game mechanic? And then if it is just a simple game mechanic change, say, well, these people over on, more specifically Alucardalina over on Chronicles of Tyria podcasts came up with this idea for in-lore reasons why. Maybe
Work
they'll
it
go
out
for
for
it. Yeah. So, alright, so that's kind of our physiology piece of the Norn. Again, they just look like big muscly humans.
Pretty much.
Oh, and tattoos. Big on tattoos.
I always kind of thought that they looked like if you had like giant-sized dwarves, that's what a Norn is, basically.
That's actually not a bad description, because they are heavy on the extravagant kind of facial hair, but they also have lots of tattoos, which is funny because they're the only race that is allowed to have, you know, formal, you know, tattoos. Like, even though humans could theoretically have tattoos, yeah, they're not allowed. That's what the Norn are given instead.
Well, the Asura have marks.
That's
So-
true. And I mean, the Silvari have skin patterns as well.
The
But-
only thing I disagree with Norns being bigger dwarves is that they actually have necks.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Very true.
At least most of them do.
Yeah, also true. Alright, so why don't we talk culture? Norn culture. It's a pretty rich culture with a lot of interesting aspects to it. So, Bromms, why don't I let you start? What do you have? Do you have anything for Norn culture?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the culture kind of revolves around the spirits. That seems to be kind of their big thing. It's not just the religious part of their lives. It's very intertwined with kind of everything they do. So as of the Guild Wars 2 game, there's really 4 spirits that are the main powerful spirits. There's a bunch of minor spirits, but they're not revered quite as much as the others. So the ones that you can actually pick from in your background are Bear, Raven, Snow Leopard, and Wolf. And they all have different traits that kind of represent virtues that the Norn hold, like bravery, cunning, strength, things like that. Do you want to go into what each of them mean?
You know what? Let me cut you off there, and let me
Okay.
jump back to, before we go full stop into the spirits, because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Let's just talk Norn behavior first.
Okay.
So we kind of mentioned it in that little bit I had there from Jeff Grubb, where he said, you know, they're your traditional heroes, and I don't know if I would have gone that far, but they definitely are all about personal success and glory. You know, they don't fear death, and they kind of revel in the, you know, the danger and the aspect of dying. And their biggest fear really is being forgotten. You know, is being seen as weak, or, you know, they died in some great battle and no one tells the tale of that battle, and they're forever kind of lost in history. That's the biggest fear of Norn, and we kind of see that in Ghosts of Ascalon with Gullick's cousin, I believe. That's actually what has Gullick. That's why he attacks Dougal Keen, because he didn't sing of his cousin's, you know, great victory and, you know, great glorify her death in the, you know, in the catacombs below Divinity's Reach. So that was just kind of to give you an idea of what they are and how they act, and, you know, who they are. Let's see. To kind of tee off of, they all dream about having this story told. They dream about having these stories told by Skalds, which are kind of the storytellers of the Norn. That's Skaald. It's basically a Norn bard, if that was a thing.
Yeah.
They just go and they tell the stories. And again, actually, to tie you back into Viking culture, Skalds were actually court poets in the Viking Age. So they would recite or compose verses about deeds and battles that their king would be a part of, and things like that, or other high-ranking members of society. So pretty much, this wasn't altered too much from its original origin. It was just kind of transplanted into the game and tweaked a little bit. They're also a pretty. I mean, I think there's some exceptions here, but they are a very honorable group. They respect honor and people's word and things like that, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting because they are definitely focused on the honor aspect, and they revere people that do great deeds. But what's interesting is that their definition of what is a great deed may not necessarily mesh with what human culture would say is a great deed. So sometimes the Norn are seen as sometimes like too sneaky, or like there might be a person that in human society would be considered a criminal or this horrible person, but they're revered in Norn society because they have done something great that's worthy of being mentioned.
Yeah, I definitely like the cult. I wish I liked the characters more, but I really love kind of the culture and the behavioral aspects of the Norn more than I enjoy actually playing a Norn, which is sad.
I
Might
said
be better.
feel the same.
Go ahead.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it might be more fun to play if you could like have like the dwarven drinking skills.
Yeah.
Like this works only if you're drunk.
Yeah, I do really enjoy that.
One of the things about the Norn that I found interesting is they're different from most of the other races this way, is that when you're born, your own merits determine how you're viewed in society. So even though a Norn might take on one of their parents in their surname, like if your father's name was Bjorn, you might be Bjornson or Bjorndottir, but the actions of your parents have no standing on how you're viewed. It's all things that you've done.
Yeah, and there's actually a piece of that I want to touch on in a second, kind of clear what we were just talking about before about that the Norn from Guild Wars 1, the one that would try to marry your character. But I do actually have, and I actually read this, I still have the page dog-eared because I read this in the first Norn show we ever did. But I have an excerpt from Ghosts of Ascalon. It says, "The Norn were a healthy, hardy, proud people, quick to anger and equally quick to forgive. In his time since leaving Ebonhawk, Dougal had met good Norn and bad Norn. The good ones treated every day as an adventure, every problem as a challenge, and every foe as a chance for personal glory. Most people didn't understand how dangerous the dark places of the world could be. The Norn actually relished exploring them. Gitta, though, was definitely in the latter category of Norn. Boastful, judgmental, and unpleasant to those around her, she was both bullying and insulting, as if any achievement by others diminished her own." So, it's a little excerpt from Ghosts of Ascalon.
This reminds me
Mhm.
of a thing that happens, a set of dialogue that happens in Holbrook pertaining to Norn culture. Have you read the one about the wreaths that they give? That they lay
No,
at the doors?
no.
It's at Sigfaststeading, and the guy basically almost didn't get to be a wolfborn, which not as in that's their spirit, but as in like the big group of wolfborn. And he basically called Scardy, the person who started the wolfborn group, he called his father an unflattering name. And Scardy did not like that, of course, and basically he had to lay a wreath at Scardy's door to apologize. and there are different things based on what happens to that wreath. And if they take the wreath inside, it means you are forgiven. It's the best of all outcomes, and the matter is dropped forever. If you lay a stein in the wreath, it means that the offended and the offender must drink their way to forgiveness.
That's awesome.
If you break the wreath, then you must fight until only one is left standing. Afterward, all is forgiven no matter who wins. And leaving the wreath there means that there can never be any forgiveness, but that rarely happens.
Huh. That is actually extremely interesting. I didn't know anything about that.
I talked to like all the NPCs, so stumbling upon this stuff is just really great.
No, this is why it's really, if you really are a fan of Guild Wars lore, this is why it's really good to make sure you go in and, you know, if you're not sure what you want to do and you're in between farms or dungeons or whatever, talk to the NPCs around you, because there is a lot of information there, but sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. In all of the cities, there's a ton of NPCs to talk to, and you can learn so much about about everything, but specifically the race that city is tied to. And it's stuff that you won't find anywhere else. Like you won't find a lot of it online. You won't find a lot of it in your story. Yeah, it's definitely worth taking the time to do that.
And I guess a little hint for those of you, look for NPCs with names. Not like, you know, generic Wolfborn whatever, or, you know, Son of Svanir or whatever, or Peacemaker or whatever. Someone that has a unique name. Not like a generic NPC name. Those are the ones that usually have the best information, because they have a story that's individual enough that ArenaNet saw to give them a name so that you could search them on the wiki. That's my thought of how that works. Whether or not that's true is another story, but so a little bit more. We know that they really respect anybody that's able to best them in a fight, and we see this in Guild Wars 1 through the fight. What was his name, Claire? You did the fighting ring in Gunner's Holdstead, or you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I really don't remember. Hold on.
Everybody runs to Google. Well, I'm sorry, everybody. While we look that up, I'm gonna keep going talking about something else. The other thing we did kind of see again in Guild Wars 1 is getting drunk and partying. It's common practice in both Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, and we don't really see it too much in Guild Wars 2. In Guild Wars 1, there was the Ale Moot, the Great Norn Ale Moot that you got to participate in, which is just a big competition of skill and drinking and being able to show skill while being drunk, which was actually part of the contest. You couldn't actually participate unless your character was drunk. So that was interesting as well.
Was it Magni the Bison?
Yes.
Yes.
That was him. So he had a whole ring of you would fight people eventually to get up to him, and that was kind of just a testament to how much the Norn respect people that are able to best them in battle, and you actually got the champion, like the chalice, if you defeated him. So that was pretty cool.
I hated that fight.
Yeah, spirit spamming ritualist, easiest way. Just put out all spirits and just chill in the back.
Yep.
Alright, so again, just a little bit before we jump back to the spirits. I'm sorry we kind of diverged from there. But the religion piece and the spirits of the wild are kind of all one, so that allows us to kind of merge those and move forward. Let's talk Norn relationships, actually. And this is kind of where I wanted to go to allow Claire to talk about that very interesting situation we saw the Norn in Guild Wars 1.
Yeah, like I said, that's probably my favorite Norn ever. I don't remember his name. Do you remember it?
I don't.
Anyway.
I'll look it up, but you talk.
Okay. So basically, he sees all the deeds that you've done, and he finds that very attractive. And it really doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter that you're human. He just finds it like so attractive. And so he asks to marry you. And in order to kind of get out of this, you need to go and kind of put your level above him as far as like your deeds, your awesome feats, and you go out and you slay. Was it a worm?
Yeah, I believe so.
Anyways, you go and you slay this beast, and you come back, and he acknowledges that you outrank him, and so he cannot marry you.
Yeah, and that kind of ties. It's actually a very funny mission, and I mentioned this before. We were talking before the show. I forget who it was from ArenaNet said that was one of the biggest regrets they had about Guild Wars 1 was putting in that mission because of all the fans. It sparked all of the interest in Norn human cross race relationships and whether or not viable children could be born from that, and then interracial mixing and all this kind of craziness. And they're like, it would have just been so much easier if we just left that mission out of the game entirely. And
I'm glad they didn't, because it actually gives you some good information on how Norn society works.
Mhm.
I think that would kind of be lost if you didn't have that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it also kind of, like you said, it is very much, it shows that that's kind of how Norn, not marrying humans as well, how Norn marry, or how they, their relationship status. That's basically the best example of Norn relationships that we have.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that, they want to marry, Norn are going to want to marry someone of equal stature of them, not lesser stature, not better stature. And like, if they're really striving to marry someone and they're better than them, they're going to go out there and get themselves to be up to that level, whatever it takes. And that's just, it's an interesting kind of, I don't know, it's an interesting relationship system. So I like it. I feel it really fits the Norn well. That's pretty much all we have, I think.
It's like they don't discriminate.
No.
I think that's a really nice thing, is that they don't discriminate against gender or race.
Yeah, they're just all about glory, like we said earlier.
And it's actually interesting because we'll talk about the Sons of Svanir later, but there's the Sons of Svanir are supposed to be considered this like evil group, but they have a lodge in Holbrak because the Norn don't see the whole group as evil. It's just individuals. So each individual gets a chance to either do good things or bad things, and they're judged according to that. So there's no discrimination as far as like, oh, you belong to this group, so you're automatically put into this category.
Yeah, and it's like, and I mean, we kind of saw that a little bit with the Asura, how they kind of just seem to almost turn a blind eye to the Inquest. But
yeah, it's the Asura just don't care because they're like, whatever. But the Norn, yeah, it's slightly different, but it's kind of the same, I guess.
Right. So I think that's pretty much our best, our only real information we have about Norn relationships. Do we have? You know what? Actually, we do have a little bit more now that I think about it. Let's talk, parent-child Norn relationships, because we didn't see too much in Guild Wars 1. I think we saw a little bit. I think it was Olaf. Was it Olaf's daughter? The one I was just mentioning about with the 5 Norn that showed up in Guild Wars 1. I think that might have been Olafstead, of Olafstead. It was his daughter that came. But we see that probably our best description of parent, or one of the only descriptions we really have good, is Bram and Air, actually.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting, given the fact that Air is this great hero, and we didn't even know she had a child.
Yeah.
Very late spoiler alert.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. You're not gonna find out. You can't find out now.
True.
It's not a thing. That story mission's over and done with, so you can't even find out about it.
That's right.
So unless you wiki it. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting. She seems to just. I don't want to say because she does acknowledge that he is her child, but she doesn't seem. He's obviously not a big part of her life.
Yeah, it seems like he's kind of. I mean, he's obviously unproven right now because he hasn't really done a whole lot that we know about. So I kind of feel like it relates to that. Like, because he hasn't done a lot, his standing is such that he's not really respected, and so despite being his mother, um, he has to he has to complete those deeds in order to get that respect.
And yeah, that's actually I didn't even think about it from that perspective, but that basically just kind of sums up everything we were just talking about marriage. Is that he hasn't done anything great to really be seen as almost respectable within the Norn community, and this even extends as far as mother and son, because he hasn't really done much at this point. I mean, even though he does help with the Molten Alliance, uh, although he was sent to be the Norn or no, he wasn't sent as the Norn representative to
Mm-mm.
the Queen's Jubilee. Rocks just kind of dragged him along. So yeah, it is interesting. So, oh, apparently during a wedding, someone must speak on behalf of the couple in order to show that they're a worthy match for each other. So I didn't know that either. Just saw that right now. Alright, so yeah, it isn't this whole having glory and of equal status transcends not only relationship, but parent-child relationships as well. So complicated race, the Norn.
At least they're consistent.
That's true too. Alright, so let's after that long diversion, let's bring it back to the spirits of the wild. So why don't you just go through the spirits again, Bromms, in case anybody forgot in the time we've been gone.
Right. Well, the four, if you want to call them main spirits, are bear, raven, snow leopard, and wolf. And they're significant because when the Norn had to flee south, when Jormag started to come back, those were the spirits that essentially helped the Norn and kind of led them to safety. So Bear is basically considered the greatest spirit in most cases. It's the most common symbol that's found in Norn culture, and she represents strength and fortitude. Raven represents more intellect and cunning, kind of the traits that you would associate with ravens. And he's associated with the underworld very often and spirits of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Snow leopard represents things like stealth, subterfuge, even independence. And wolf represents loyalty, fellowship, and strength in numbers. So that's kind of how the main spirits are viewed in Norn society.
Alright, and it is worth mentioning that there are several other spirits of the wild as well, lesser spirits, if you will. Let's see. Some of the other spirits that are less powerful spirits, like Minotaur, Worm, and Eagle, they're rarely ever called upon. And I didn't know this till just recently. There are also non-sentient spirits as well. Spirit of mountain, fire, or darkness, which aren't even spirits of the wild, technically. But they're depicted as challenges to strive against, or legendary obstacles placed in a hero's path, rather than friends or guides like the spirit of the wild. So that was very new to me. There are also other spirits that have been lost or fallen in the fight to Jormag. There's Owl, Doliak, which is sometimes also referred to as Ox, Eagle, and Wolverine are kind of heralded for their bravery and sacrifice. We know that I believe, owl flew into Jormag's mouth and just started clawing up Jormag from the inside in the throat to kind of hold Jormag back to allow the Norn to continue to travel further south.
Yeah, it's believed that the other spirits died during that fight, but it's not confirmed. But we quote unquote know that Owl is gone because the shaman that's associated with Owl basically lost his connection, and yeah.
The owl lodge is abandoned and fallen in now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is, again, like Bromms said, it's been confirmed from the shaman, or Havrun is another name for the shaman, that there is no connection to Owl anymore. So we don't know about Doliak, Eagle, and Wolverine. Those spirits, which as far from the way it's described, are, bigger spirits, not like Minotaur, Worm, and Eagle that are kind of lesser spirits. They're larger, more important spirits, but they have, we don't know their status. And I guess it should also be mentioned that kind of Havruns are a special servant to the spirit, and they can kind of physically, they can cross into the mists, go to the Hall of Spirits, and kind of interact with the spirit of the wild on their own kind of turf. And you have to be born a Havrun. I don't believe you just become one. I think it's like a thing you're born with, if I remember correctly. There's only one Havrun per spirit of the wild. Okay, I lied. You can have ones in training, but there is only one active Havrun at a time. So I don't believe there is a Havrun of Doliak, Eagle, or Wolverine at this time. So there's no one to be able to tell you whether or not they're alive or dead. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of in limbo. But we know that Owl is no longer with us. There are a couple other spirits as well, lesser spirits, that I didn't even find out about till just doing research for this. There's an otter spirit. Didn't know about that one. Because I guess there's actually, yeah, because you can actually get one of the ascended amulets is called Prayer to Otter. And it says, Otter is a fickle spirit, but when she does grant a boon, it is a powerful gift indeed. And it's one of the amulet gives healing power, toughness, and power. And that's about all we have for Otter. There's a gorilla spirit. Didn't know if you guys knew that one.
I didn't.
Again, ascended accessory, Totem of the Gorilla. An intrepid Norn artist paid respect to the far-flung spirit of the wild with this carving. So, Totem of the Gorilla. Another one that many people may know is the hare or rabbit spirit, because there is that little mission. There's like the rabbit or hare. I think it's in whatever. Wow, I can't even think of the Norn starting area.
Wayfarer.
Yes, Wayfarer. Yeah, in the kind of grassy-ish area, I believe.
There's the heart. That's
where
you have to. Yeah, it's just coming out of the grassy forest area.
Yeah, there's where you're running around and you're trying to pick up I forget what it is, to bring them back, and the rabbits kind of knock you over.
The hidden rabbit food stash.
Yes, that's what it is. So I guess it's believed, and there's that quote that one Norn says about, like, I can feel rabbit like its tail wagging in my heart, or whatever. Do you guys remember that line? No, it's just me. Naveen says it all the time, and it's hilarious whenever she says it. So, right. I think the only other thing worth mentioning is I believe it's in Holbrack. Yeah, there's the Lost Spirits Hallow, which is a shrine dedicated to the kind of spirits that have been lost. So you can go check that out. Again, if you have some time between whatever you're doing, explore the cities of the major races. There's a lot of information there.
Can I add on that?
Yes, you can.
When you actually go there, Al is the only one that doesn't answer.
There you go.
Interesting.
You get little signs from every other one, but not Al.
Well, there you go. And I believe it's Owl, Ox, and Wolverine were the ones that are there, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's Eagle as well as supposed to be one that had fallen, but Eagle doesn't have a shrine there. So that's kind of interesting. But I have an interesting tidbit because it's regarded that Eagle is a spirit of the wild. And it's mentioned in a couple of places, I believe, in the game. But funny enough, if you look in the making of manual, there's actually an interesting thing about that. So it says, the Norn's combination of animism and independence leads them to worship a variety of animal spirits. Their devotion goes so far as to allow the Norn to shapeshift temporarily into these chosen species, whether it be snow leopard, raven, bear, or wolf. However, worshipping a particular animal totem isn't about power unless you're a member of the dragon revering Sons of Svanir. Each of the animals represent a different trait, and not all made the final cut. We referred to other animals during the early designs of Eye of the North. There was Eagle, but it became Raven. So, even though they call it out as a spirit of legend in one of their articles called A Spirit of Legend, in their making of book, they say that during the process of making Guild Wars 2, Eagle was converted into Raven. So, I don't know which one to believe. We're getting conflicting things both from the in-game sources as well as the the story sources here from ArenaNet. They said there was also Ox. There was an event in the personal story of the Norn that called for a rabbit or snowshoe hare. In the first draft, it was simply called Bunny, Grubb says with a laugh. It is no longer Bunny, but snowshoe hare did make it into the game as an ambient creature. But yeah, isn't that, I don't know, I find that pretty interesting. That says Eagle was just, they gave up on Eagle and called it Raven. But then there's a whole story about how it was one of the 4 spirits that fought Jormag to give the Norn time to flee south. So, I don't know, guys. If you're going to PAX Prime, ask ArenaNet. If not, send us your speculation, what you think. Did they just forget about it? And, or, why does Eagle not have a shrine at the Lost Spirits Hallow?
That is a very good question.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Mm-hmm. So, I think the only other Spirit of the Wild we haven't really talked on is Dragon. Whether or not you actually consider Dragon to be a Spirit of the Wild. The Sons of Svanir will tell you differently. But, did you have anything for Dragon over there, Bromms?
Not, but I mean, Dragon is technically not a Spirit of the Wild. So there's that. Although the Svanir call it a Spirit of the Wild.
Well, it is wild. I don't know about a spirit.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the dragon refers to Jormag, who's obviously a dragon, not a spirit. So, yeah.
Alright, well, here's a little snippet for you guys then. Since the rise of Jormag, there are those among the Norn, always young, male, and eager to prove themselves, who claim that Dragon should be revered among the spirits of the wild. They admire Jormag's strength, its viciousness, and its cruelty. They claim that, by following the path of Dragon, a Norn can become as undefeatable as the dragon itself. They look at the tale of Jorah and her brother Svanir and see him as the first convert to the new spirit. Jorah, who did not accept Dragon's blessing, is reviled among their cult, as are all women. Interestingly, Jormag does not show the same bias as its Sons of Svanir followers. It has been known to corrupt all races and all genders. Dragon has no shaman. Those who follow it do not have the ability to go into the mists on its behalf, nor do they have the gifts Norn expect to see in the shamans of the spirits of the wild. A dragon shaman may think he is spiritual, but he falls woefully short of the real thing. These advocates of the dragon teach only corruption, they are given foul blessings, they are changed forever by Jormag. In the end, they too become ice-brewed and serve the beast. They may call themselves shaman, but most Norn consider them fools, dangerous ones. Still, the promise of power and the challenge to be one that masters the dragon's gifts continues to lure arrogant, driven, young Norn into the dragon's service. And to kind of tee off Bromms' piece before, there's a little ArenaNet has a little article here. Norn culture stresses individuality. It demands that a person be judged by their own actions, not by the actions of a group in which they belong. If 3 sons of Svanir attack a shrine, those individuals are hunted down and punished. That does not mean another Norn who claims to be a part of the Sons of Svanir will be punished or treated badly because of the event. In the Norn mindset, he didn't do it, so he isn't to be blamed. This doesn't mean that the Norn ignore a person's allegiances or that they don't understand Sons of Svanir are dangerous people. It is simply that, as a race, Norn do not judge an individual for the sins of his tribe. So, I think that probably sums up Dragon. And pretty much the Sons of Svanir, really, as a whole. Unless you guys have anything else you'd like to add to the Sons of Svanir.
Not really.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. There's not a whole lot to them really, other than the dragon worship. Yeah, that's about it.
Alright, I'll just kind of glance over government quick, because there isn't really much in the way
Before
of...
that, can I mention?
Yeah?
You mentioned the Hall of Spirits, but the way that Jorah talks about it, it kind of seems like that's where they think they'll go after they die.
Okay.
If they are brave.
Right, okay,
Like,
yes.
if they've done enough feats to actually get into it. So, it's like Sovereign Guard in Skyrim, or I forget what it's called in Norse.
Valhalla.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. And again, yes, that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because once again, tying pretty much directly into that kind of Viking Norse mythology that is like the concept of Valhalla, is this Hall of the Spirits. So, good catch on that, Alucardalina. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I think... Alright, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we kind of move on?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Oh, actually, I did. I had a little thing about the way they kind of see the human gods. I forgot. So they don't worship, obviously, the human gods, but they do acknowledge that the human gods exist and that they are powerful. Obviously, Guild Wars 2, it's a little bit different since they're not actually active and showing themselves. But they don't refer to them as their human, as like the human names. Like, they don't refer to Balthazar as Balthazar. They refer to them as the spirits of action, and kind of refer to them and, you know, see them as whatever they, whatever that god governs. So they would call Balthazar war, or Cormyr knowledge, spirit of, you know, it would be this human worships war, as in the spirit of action, war, meaning Balthazar. So just a little other tidbit regarding the spirits of the wild, which is, I like this kind of stuff, where you see the interaction and how one race, you know, sees something else.
Yeah, there's not enough of that in my opinion, because like, especially with the human gods, they're very obviously a strong part of the history, and even now that they're missing, there are still things associated with them that make them very real, like some of the human elite skills, just talking from a mechanics standpoint. And I don't think it's discussed quite enough. Like, we know how the Char feel about them and the Norn, but the rest of it seems fairly ambiguous. So.
Yeah. So, again, the Norn don't really have... I'm going to move on to the government piece. They don't really have a central government because of the way Norn operate as being so individualistic. They wouldn't really... I couldn't see the Norn kneeling to like a king or a queen. That's not really Norn style. Plus, if somebody else had more feats than that king, then you'd have a change in royalty in like an instant.
Right.
So kind of the closest thing, they like I said, they do worship everybody based on their deeds, but Newt Whitebear, he's the master of Holbrook Lodge, so he's kind of like the closest thing to like a leader, I would say, that they have. So he's in charge of keeping Holbrook safe, which is the Norn main city, so he kind of has, that almost that status. Like he was the one who told Jorah to leave in Edge of Destiny, or not Jorah, I'm sorry, Air. He told her to just like get out. You caused all these problems for our city. You should leave and don't come back until you find some real heroes that can fight this dragon champion. So he has at least that capability. So he's, I guess, the closest, I would say, because he has the ability to exile people from Holbrook.
Yeah, I think that the reason that they couldn't ever, like, have a person of power is because they would take it as a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't be. I don't know if that you'd have such civil war. I don't know if that would be very healthy for their survival. I mean, they already have enough problems with their race dying at young ages because they run into battle.
Yeah.
I couldn't see that being very good for the future of the Norn race.
Yeah, they've already lost a lot due to Jormag too. So.
Yeah. Wow, that actually totally reminded me of the tooth of Jormag.
Yes.
Which we should probably talk about before I move on to the next piece that I had, which I'm trying to find. But would anybody like to talk about that for more information? Anybody know anything about the tooth of Jormag?
I do.
Take it away.
Basically, I forget the guy's name. Do you remember the guy's name who faced off with the spirits?
No, I'm looking for it, so.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, so he came back with the tooth after escaping from Jormag, and he places it in Holbrag, and it's in the Great Lodge. And he basically said that if you can damage this tooth, if you can even put a chip in it, it means we might be ready to go face Jormag, but until then, we can't do this. And nobody has been able to do anything to this tooth. And you can actually go in-game and try to hit it yourself, but it has the invulnerable stat on it. So, we're obviously not ready. Doesn't matter if we're level 80 and have the best stats and gear.
Yep. I actually did find the information. It's called the Fang. The Norn refer to it as the Fang of the Serpent, and it's actually a point of interest that you can find within Holbrook. And the guy who rended the tooth was Asgeir Dragonrender, which I'm pretty sure he probably took that name after the fact.
Yeah.
But anyway, with the aid of the spirits of the wild, he was able to cut this tooth from Jormag's maw and help lead all the Norn south from, the far Shiver Peaks. Again, just as for the scale purposes, this is a tooth of Jormag, and it's bigger than most Norn. It's actually bigger than any Norn. And Norn are like 10
most buildings, I think.
Yeah, I mean, most Norn are around 9 feet tall, like we said.
Yeah.
And this is a tooth. Think about the scale of your tooth to your body, and then try to extrapolate that from this tooth. Just for scale of how big Jormag actually is.
I'm just trying to imagine all of the Norn escaping while carrying this tooth.
Yeah, I don't imagine it being a very easy task, and I would hate to be that person that's like, no, you have to carry the tooth. I'm gonna run. You guys carry this tooth, though.
There's one little blurb on the main Guild Wars 2 page under the Norn that kind of touches on that too. It says, Jormag may have driven them from their original homeland, but for all its power, the dragon has not crushed the spirit of the Norn. They see Jormag as a mighty challenge to be overcome. It is said that someday a hero will rise to shatter the tooth of Jormag and show the Norn the way back to their northern homes. Will that hero be you?
Not yet.
No.
Apparently not.
Not
Not until they take the buff off of it.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that will be amazing when they do, though.
I hope they don't tell anybody either. Like,
Yeah.
just one living story update, the buff is off, and somebody just happens to swing and it cracks.
That would actually be really cool.
And then, it's like a game-wide event.
Yeah, I could see that being the introduction to, like, one of their bigger story things, is that, like, that's how it kicks off. It doesn't start until someone actually hits it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I love...
I want to be that person.
So there you go, guys. Don't ever leave Holbrack.
Just camp out in front of that tooth and watch it every single day.
Every living story update, make sure you go check on the tooth. Interesting piece about Asgir Dragonrender. It's said that he had a scroll, a Durban Priory scroll with him. Had a very powerful scroll with him that may have aided in his ability to rend the tooth from Jormag. And the Durban Priory is actually on a mission trying to find that scroll to figure out where it is.
Maybe that scroll helped him carry it.
Maybe it was just it wasn't actually a scroll, it was like a sled. And just on it.
Harry's looking for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Like a Tensor's floating disc from D&D.
There you go.
Yeah.
Also, he's the Asgir Dragonrender is the grandfather of New White Bear. So, there's also an interesting scene in Edge of Destiny where, after slaying the one dragon champion, Jorah tries to rend the tooth to crack it. I keep saying Jorah. Air tries to break the tooth. It's because I love Jorah so much more than I love Air.
Yeah.
I like Jorah, so automatically a win. So I keep wanting Air to be Jorah. But yeah, she tries and she fails, and then Ritlock and Logan are like, "Let us try," and she's like, "No, just whatever. I'm moody," and leaves. But I have a strange feeling that if Ritlock used Sahathan, that it might have done damage to Jormag's tooth.
Because she's Ritlock.
I just have a feeling that that kind of like a special magic blade or magic item like that would be what could damage this is a legendary, even though it's not, but like a legendary weapon in the Guild Wars mythos. I feel like that would be something that might be able to do it. Something like that.
Yeah.
Like the Claw of the Con maybe as well. Something like that could damage the tooth. Whereas Air was just using like a mallet, I think, and a chisel. Like her sculpting tools.
Well, Sahathan is also like fiery, so I guess that could help too.
I mean, it can't hurt, right? So.
See, I wonder if they're setting Bram up to be that character.
Oh, you know what? You're probably right.
I'm going to be upset if I can't be the one to break the tooth.
Yeah, or if you break the tooth and then Bram takes all the credit.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Thanks for
Don't
helping
give them
me break.
any ideas.
Yeah, right. Then the only other thing to kind of mention about the government is the Wolfborn, like Alucardalina mentioned before, are the kind of, I guess they're like the peacekeepers of Holbrack, and they're mostly most of them are sons and children of Newt Whitebear. So, but yeah, so that's that. And then you have that wonderful whole story that Claire told us about Scardy and Sigfast. So, and they're mockingly called the Wolf Cubs by the Sons of Svanir. All right, so let's move on to I guess that's the main piece done. So let's talk key characters. We kind of talked a lot about each of them, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But do you guys have any other key characters that you would really like to touch on more in depth than we kind of already did?
Well, we touched on the big thing with Jorah. Air is Yeah, she's the member of Destiny's Edge that acts as your mentor if you play a Norn character. Um, she has a lot to do with why it kind of broke up, and she's blamed a lot for letting I can't think of his name. That's awful.
Snaff.
Yes, thank you for letting Snaff die. Um, so she kind of holds that all on herself at the beginning when you first meet her, and she's trying to get Logan and Ritlock back to to make up, and she fails monumentally. But yeah, that's kind of her deal. She doesn't do a whole lot after that, really. After she does the mentoring thing, she's in the the dungeon stories, but honestly, I can't think of a lot notable about her other than she has an awesome wolf.
Yeah, Garm is pretty awesome. 'Cause he's giant.
Yeah.
He's also, I think he won like a Winter's Day battle or something. If you go into Ritlock's chamber, it says like Winter's Day snowball fight or something, won by Ritlock and Garm.
Awesome.
Oh,
I'll have to find the exact article for that. But,
a lot of people mention Garm. Like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you just talk to the NPCs around like Wayfar,
Mhm.
a lot of them like just mention him. I don't really remember what was said. I just remember every time he was mentioned because he's like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the best member of Destiny's Edge currently.
I have to disagree, but he's like my second favorite. Okay.
Yeah. There's a book cart in Ebonhawk, actually. It's supposed to be a child story told in pictures called Garm and Friends.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
That needs to be made as a video.
Apparently, you can talk to Garm at one point in one mission.
Yeah, I think that you can talk to him. Is it not in the Lion's Arch one?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've never done it. But I guess if you have the blessing, this like Twilight of the Wolf thing, you can actually speak to him.
Oh wow, I didn't know that one.
Garm can be spoken to during the Norn story quest, The Last of the Giant Kings, should you choose to seek Wolf's blessing within the quest, Twilight of the Wolf.
Oh, I'm gonna do that.
So there you go. If you guys love Garm, you can actually, if you receive the blessing of the Wolf and do the mission Last of the Giant Kings, which I'm not sure what leads up to that, you can actually have dialogue with Garm. So there you go, guys.
Awesome.
Anybody else that you want to mention that we haven't really touched on? Bram, you can kind of still see currently in the game because he is running around in the living story, and they're kind of making him a big deal.
The only other Norn I have is Warmaster Forgol Kernson. He's the mentor for characters that join the Vigil. But he is very forgettable. He does kind of embody a lot of the typical Norn traits. He doesn't really think much of you at first, and as you start to do more with the Vigil and your ranking of deeds kind of increases, he begins to think more of you. But yeah, he's definitely not as interesting as the other two mentors, in my opinion.
And I also feel, I mean, like you said, he does really embody what it is to be a Norn, but it also kind of brings to mind that how much the Vigil seems catered to be like a Norn, like in order for Norn to join. But I am always still hopeful of like the super old Norn that just decided to become a scholar in the Derman Priory that's actually been around for hundreds of years. but we don't, because we don't really know how of a Norn that's died of old age, because we don't know how long we know that some have lived to 120. We don't know if any have lived past or what their actual lifespan is.
Yeah.
So I'm still hopeful. I think I mentioned this the first go around, but I'm hopeful for that one scholar Norn that's been hiding all these years, that's been around since before, and he's just biding his time, learning and helping the Derman Priory, almost like Ogden has been. So, do you guys have any other key characters you wanted to mention?
Can I mention that the Norn that was talking about marriage, that was actually Olaf Olafsson.
Was it really?
Yes. It's because his wife, he doesn't have a wife. I think she died. He only has a daughter, meaning he can't continue the line of name of Olaf Olafsson. Because I think that, let me see, hold on. He is the seventh of that name in the direct line. And he doesn't want it to be forgotten.
Well, alright.
He says that he wants to raise 12 half-Norn children.
Wow. There you go, guys. How about that?
There's one other Norn. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hold on. The Leviathan that you killed in that quest was his wife's murder.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains a lot, too. Because that means another reason why he couldn't do that. He couldn't kill his wife's killer. So you did it, now you're definitely above him.
Yeah, and he got upset that we killed his wife's killer, too.
Yeah.
Oops.
So, alright. What are you gonna say, Bromms?
It's definitely not a key character. It's almost more of an Easter egg. But if you go to Radasum down into the prisons, there is, locked up in one of their containment cells, there's a talking bear. And it's actually a Norn that was transformed, that was locked up. And it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that either. I'm missing out.
Oh, you should go see it.
Definitely. So,
Gotta
again...
Off Radasum.
Yeah, again, you guys, this is why it's good to explore all the given areas, because you never know. Never know what you're going to find. Alright, so I think that probably sums us up for key characters.
I think so.
Alright, did you guys have any Norn speculation that you wanted to talk about? Things you think might happen, things you'd like to see with the Norn in the future?
I have a feeling that if we ever get around to fighting Jormag, I have a feeling we're going to be fighting the owl spirit that's been corrupted.
Ooh.
And I think it would be super cool.
That would be crazy. That would also explain why you wouldn't be able, the Haverin would not be able to contact it, because it's not technically around to be contacted because it was corrupted.
Right.
Huh. Interesting. You have anything else like that? Because that was pretty great.
Yeah.
No.
You let me down.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the tooth of Jormag. I can't imagine they're not going to do something with that down the road. But it's hard to tell what that's going to be. So yeah.
Claire, did you have any speculation?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything myself, and I don't want to keep us here any longer than we have to be while we just try to randomly come up with stuff.
I'm sorry, there is one other thing, and it doesn't specifically tie into Norn, but it kind of does.
Okay.
During the whole Flame and Frost event, there were a lot of Norn that were displaced because of the invasions. And so a lot of those refugees were funneled into Lion's Arch, but then they were also funneled off to South Sun Cove.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice, a lot of the Aether Blades are Norn and Char. So the speculation is that a lot of the displaced Norns joined the Aetherblades because they didn't really have anywhere else to go.
Hmm. Well, that's a good point too. I didn't even think about that. But now that you mention it, I realize how much it is Char and Norn, almost entirely Char and Norn comprised. Huh. See? You sure you don't have anything else? Because you're on a roll right now.
Yeah.
No. I'm sure there's probably stuff on Reddit that's awesome, but I haven't checked that.
Alright. Well, again, if you guys have any Norn speculation, please feel free to send it to us in an email. Comment on this the YouTube video here, or send us a message on Facebook, just to see what you guys have, because we, I mean, when I say we, I mean Bromms has come up with some pretty great, or even if he hasn't come up with it, he's brought us to attention to some of this really great speculation that's out there. I do think that the tooth, again, would be awesome if we were to just randomly one day find, like, that's what it is, until somebody actually hits it. Like, ArenaNet has this all planned out. They're waiting for someone to go hit it, and then as soon as it does, then it sparks a new world event. That'd be kind of crazy. But yeah, I'd love to see some of the other... I feel like this could also be expansion material, as well as some of the other spirits that haven't been killed. Or I'm sorry, that we don't know about, like Wolverine and potentially Eagle if it exists. And Ox and those ones, if they were like became available in an expansion, and then you were to have like new elite skills and whole new like paths to follow those specific spirits, I think that would be kind of neat.
I will play a Norn if we can turn into Dolyaks.
That'll make Dolyak parades better in World versus World.
That's true. Oh my god, how funny would it be if you had increased supply carry in World versus World if you were Dolyak form?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that'd be too OP though. That wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah. Alright, so I think, unless you guys have anything else, Norn, that you want to mention, kind of bring this to a close.
Nothing here.
Nope.
Alright. Alright guys, so thanks for coming out and checking us out. Again, if you want to keep up to date with any of the stuff that we've been doing here at Chronicles of Tyria, Facebook is usually one of the best ways to keep track of us, so just look up Chronicles of Tyria on Facebook. Although we do update our Twitter, not nearly as frequently as our Facebook. So yeah, for Chronicles of Tyria Lorecast, episode number 8, I'm Lagwyn.
I'm Ellen.
I'm Bromms.
Finally got it down. And we'll see you next time.